Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Mystic Series episode today. We're going to be diving into how to balance your spiritual and mundane life and why it's so important. This is one of our last master classes during this series, so make sure you stay tuned for the last one coming up after this one. If you're new here, my name is Phoenix Normale. I am a psychic advisor on Mysticsense.com. You can find me by searching for Phoenix K and looking for my profile picture. So let's dive right into our topic today. So, how important is balancing the mundane and spiritual areas of life? Why is it so vital that we find a healthy balance for ourselves? There are many different viewpoints and approaches to this fascinating topic today. And one approach is simply that balance is key. Everything balances. In yin and yang, there's the light, there's the dark, good, bad, work, play, work-life balance. It's all a balancing act. Even our bodies are balanced. And when it comes to spiritual things, it's no different. We need to balance the spiritual and mundane worlds, just like spirit and matter make up who we are as well. And again, there's many different approaches. There's a lot of different viewpoints, but in the end, it all comes down to what is the balance. Everything has its place. Everything has its time. So if you are aware of your energy, how you feel, your energy levels, energy working, spirituality, energy work, Reiki, readings, your belief systems, working with spirits, working with ancestors, praying, all of that can fall into spiritual work because it deals with the energetic aspect of the world, the stuff you can't see, but that you feel and that you're aware of or you believe in. Now, it's super important as well to take that into consideration with your mundane life as well. The things you do see, the things you do, the actions you take. And this is what this podcast is all about today, is that it's important to find a healthy balance between what you do and what you think and what you believe. A classic example of this is people that manifest and they wonder why it doesn't work, or they do magic and they're wondering why is it not working. And chances are, if you do a spell for a new job or you're manifesting a new partner into your life and you don't put yourself out there, you don't meet new people, you're not telling people you're looking for work, you are not seeking the new job, you're not networking, it's going to be really hard for that manifestation to come into your life. Yes, the spiritual work, the energetic aspect may help boost your chances. It may help boost your exposure. It may bring the right people to you. But if you're not putting yourself out there for the right people to meet you, it's going to be very difficult for just that spiritual practice to work. It needs that mundane and that practical approach as well. Now, using both of these in tandem, doing the spiritual work and then going out and meeting people or telling people you're looking for a new relationship or a new job, that is when the true magic happens, because both of these aspects of the world can mutually help and support each other. Now, of course, you don't have to do the spiritual work, but the spiritual work can make it a little bit easier for these manifestations to actually occur. So ultimately, how much time, money, and energy that you devote to your spirituality is going to depend on you. It's going to look different to different people, but it is important that it is done in a balanced way. Some people may focus more heavily on their spirituality, but they may also do a lot of heavy, mundane things as well. That old adage, work hard, play hard, comes to mind, is that if you work super, super hard, it's important to also play super, super hard so that you at least have a balance. So if you're going to be doing tons and tons of spiritual stuff, lots of heavy energy work, it's important to also take a lot of mundane time as well for yourself so you can recharge and that you have that balance in your life. So it does look different for different people, but there is a line when spirituality can potentially become a problem. And so some of the things to look for when spirituality might be becoming a problem for you in your life, or it's imbalanced, there's too much spirituality, is if you cannot maintain your daily life due to it. And this is a super important stop sign for you. If your spiritual beliefs, your spiritual practices are causing you to miss work, or they're causing you to cancel appointments, or you're postponing your trip because it's the wrong moon phase, that can be a sign that your spirituality is becoming an issue. It's negatively impacting your life. It's negatively impacting your mundane life. That can be something to look out for. Some other signs can be that it's affecting your finances in a big way. If you are someone who loves to get psychic readings, which is great, but you do it even when you can't afford it, or you spend thousands of dollars on readings when you really can't afford to spend thousands of dollars on something or anywhere else in your life, or maybe you're in a lot of debt and you keep going in debt because of your spirituality. And it doesn't have to be readings, it can be crystals. If you are using your credit cards and maxing them out because you have to buy tons of crystals every month, that could be a big stop sign, a big red flag that maybe your spirituality is becoming a problem or it's imbalanced. It's important to find that healthy balance between the mundane and the spiritual, mundane and magical. You can buy the crystals, yes, but maybe you can put aside a small amount of money each month for your crystals instead of just buying them on a whim or when you feel like it, or maybe don't buy more than 2 at a time. So your finances, you want to look at how your spiritual practice is affecting that. But you also want to look at your social life as well. So looking at your social life is important. You want to ask yourself, is my spirituality preventing me from having friends? Is it the only thing that I can talk about? Is it all that I think about all the time? If it's affecting your social life in a big negative way, like you don't have any friends because you have no mutual interests, all you do is spiritual things. Maybe you think you don't have time to make friends because you're doing rituals or you're meditating all the time. That could be a problem. Having a healthy social life is very important. It can fall into that mundane aspect, but there's so many benefits to being social as well. And it's okay to have spiritual friends, but you want to differentiate between social time and spiritual time. If the only time you see your friends is to do rituals with them, that could be a red flag because that could be considered the spiritual practice. It's not really about the social aspect of creating friendships and connections with others. If spirituality is the only thing you ever talk about, that can be another red flag. It's important to have many interests, many things that we do. And even if it's the most important thing in your life, it's important to have other things in your life as well, even if you don't give them the same level of importance to you personally. So think about that. What can you talk about besides spiritual things? And I'm lumping spirituality as an umbrella here intentionally because some people don't consider their activities to be spiritual. If you are, for example, a tarot reader or a psychic, maybe you don't consider your tarot readings a spiritual practice. So the reason I'm lumping all of this together into spirituality is because it can come in many forms and many different practices. Maybe you're an avid meditator. Maybe you do divination a lot. Maybe you go to church a lot. All of that can be forms of spirituality in different ways, but it still is connecting with the spiritual realms. And that's what we're going to talk about, is keeping that in balance. So whether it's psychic readings, whether it's meditation, whether it's reading books on spirituality or studying spirituality, we want to make sure we have that in balance with other areas of the life as well. It should not be the only thing you can ever think about or talk about. It's important to have other interests as well that are non-spiritual, just to create that balance and to prevent the burnout. So another thing to look for if spirituality is becoming a problem for you in your life is if it impacts every decision that you make in life, including minor ones. Now, I personally know of someone who takes their pendulum everywhere and will even ask their pendulum what they should order from a menu at a restaurant because they don't want to eat anything that's not spiritually aligned to them. Now, while that may be okay for that person, you want to think about what impact is this spirituality having? Is it affecting every decision I make? Do I do nothing until I get a tarot reading? That could be a sign of a red flag, something to watch out for, that spirituality is having a negative impact on your life, because you're no longer in control at that point if you need that kind of validation from the other side in order to make even a very minor decision, like what you should wear. So keep that in mind as well. Are you in control of your spiritual path, or is your spiritual path controlling you? Now, a big stop sign here, a very important area to keep an eye on, is if you are living in fear. A lot of people end up living their whole lives, or a lot of their life, in fear of what would happen if they stop doing something. And this is particularly a important point if you're dealing with some religions or religious trauma. Um, Really take note. Is my spiritual practice causing me to live in fear? Am I afraid that if I don't do the rituals or the prayers or go to church, that something bad is going to happen to me? And this kind of goes into making those decisions as well, those even minor decisions. Are you afraid that if you eat the wrong food, something bad is going to happen because you didn't check with your pendulum? Are you afraid that if you buy the wrong clothing, that something horrible is going to happen because your divination tool did not approve it? That would be an example of living in fear. Now, even if you're afraid of not, you're afraid that if you stop doing something, if you stop doing your rituals, if you stop doing your prayers, something horrible is going to happen. That could be a really big sign that your spirituality is unbalanced with your mundane life, or that, or even something potentially even worse than that. So definitely look at that. Look at how you feel when you're practicing your spirituality. When you get done with your spiritual path, how, whatever shape or way that it takes, how do you feel after that? Do you feel happy? Do you feel connected? Do you feel grounded? Do you feel like you're really in tune with spirit? Or do you feel like you're afraid, or you've appeased something? Do you feel like you did what you had to do? Do you feel like you have to do this, or do you feel like it just benefits your life? What do you feel when you're practicing your spirituality? And this can really put into perspective, are you living in fear of what might happen if you don't do it? Now finally, our last segment on what to watch out for, that spirituality might be out of balance or it might be becoming a problem for you, is if you feel controlled by your beliefs. Now, this is important too, because again, with that fear aspect, fear is a great measure of control. Fear takes control of a lot of people's lives. Unfortunately, it's very sad, but you want to really look at your situation, look at your life, and ask yourself, who is in control of my life? Is it me, or is it my spiritual beliefs? Is it my spiritual practices? Do you feel like your beliefs are controlling you and the decisions you make? Or do you feel like you're in control of what you choose to believe in? And this is a whole can of worms here, and it's very personal to people, but it's really important to really sit back and look at your beliefs, look at your practices, and ask yourself, why do I believe this way? Why do I believe this thing? And what impact is it having on my life? Next, we're going to dive into spirituality versus religion. So a lot of people get spirituality and religion confused. They're both spiritual practices. They both have similarities, but there are some major differences as well between spirituality and religion. Now, one of these big differences is that religion often is categorized, not always, but usually, by a core belief system. It usually involves tenets and core beliefs that the adherents believe in or practice, or they adhere to. So the core beliefs, you want to look at that. Is there a set rules? Is there tenets? Is there something that everyone in the religion abides by or believes in or agrees to? Whereas spirituality doesn't always have tenets, and it tends to be more action-based or action-oriented. One example of this, it could be if you live by a certain rules, certain rules like the Golden Rule or the Ten Commandments or something of that nature. That could be more of an indication of religion, not always, but sometimes. Whereas if you just practice Reiki, that could be more of a spiritual practice because it's action oriented. It's something you're doing, it's something you believe in, but it's something you're doing on your own. Or if you practice meditation, could be a spiritual action versus a belief system. Another important thing to look at is that religion often involves other people. It's not just you believing these things, it's a community believing these things. Religion is often very community centered, and it involves groups of people doing spiritual things together. Spirituality is not always this way. There are many, many solitary practitioners doing spiritual things with or without beliefs attached to them. They just do it on their own because it helps their life. It could be that they believe in these things, but it doesn't always involve other people. In fact, spirituality is often more solitary and personalized than religion is. Another thing to consider is if there is a clear definition of what or who God is and what divinity looks like or what forms divinity takes. That could be a sign of religion, that there is a clearly represented or presented version of divinity, that God is this, God is that, God takes these forms. If there is teachings around what divinity looks like, that could be a sign of a religion versus a spirituality where divinity comes to the person in the way they understand, or perhaps there's no divinity at all in a spiritual practice. Now, religions also have shared mythologies. There is stories, there's an origin, there is, a system of beliefs, a system of history that goes along with many religions. And this really goes back to those core beliefs as the mythology, whatever it is. It comes down and the practitioners believe in it and they agree upon it, and it sets the shape of the core beliefs and the tenets of the faith, and that could be a sign of a religion. Whereas spirituality, again, may not have any concept of mythology. It may simply be practices. It could have a mythology attached to it, but it doesn't necessarily create the core basis of the practices. Now, it's important to note that spirituality and religion do have a lot of overlap. Okay, many religions incorporate spirituality into them. Many spiritual paths have religious practitioners in them. They are not the same thing. You can't have religion without spirituality. Secular religions do exist, but you can also have spirituality with no religion attached to it, whether or not there's a divinity involved. That is super important to understand that spirituality and religion, while they may be spiritual, they may be similar, they are not the same thing, and they can and do overlap, but they do not have to. Super important points there. And so with this discussion as well, you do want to think about your religious beliefs and if they are impacting your mundane life as well. And it's interesting because if we look at one of those red flags that your spirituality is out of balance with your mundane life, if you cannot maintain your daily life due to it, it causes you to miss work or appointments. Sometimes religions do cause people to miss work or appointments. And that, in that case, is a religious thing and it's not a spiritual thing. I just want to make that distinction. Like religious holidays are observed by law in some places, some locations in the world. And that is different from a spiritual practice in that it's part of a shared faith and core belief system that is not always present in spirituality. So it does get a little sticky, but it's important to understand the differences in this, because if your practices, if your spirituality is causing you to miss a lot of work or cancel your appointments or cancel your trips because, again, the moon phase is wrong for it, or your tarot card got a bad card for that, so you can't go because, the spirituality is impacting your daily life in that way. If it happens once or twice, just take note. But if it's consistent or it happens a lot, that could be a very big red flag. Now, it's important to keep the mundane before magical. That's something a lot of people say in my spiritual community personally, mundane before magical. This is a really slippery slope that can get people can get caught up in. Is, yes, magical things, spiritual things, manifestation has a very important part in life for many people, but at the same time, it's important to put that into perspective. That it is benefiting and supporting your life and not detracting or harming it. Now, one thing we see as psychic advisors a lot is that people think their lives are a spiritual problem. Some people think. Some people believe that there's a spiritual source to their issues. Not everyone, but some people, or that they're cursed, or that bad things are happening. And Mysticsense, we cannot talk about curses or black magic as part of our house rules, but that is part of that, a small part of that, is because not everything is a spiritual problem. And it's super important to put it into perspective that the mundane needs to come before the magical. So before you think, oh, I'm cursed or I have bad spirits around me, you need to really think, okay, is this a coincidence? Is there a mundane cause for this happening? Could it be that my actions are causing this? Could it be paranoia? Could it be that it's just, a coincidence, it's just a streak of bad luck? Or perhaps it's something even more mundane. For example, some people hear creaking in their house and they think, oh, it's haunted. And it's really just that the house needs some remodeling. Or a lot of people, I've heard this online, I actually looked into it, when they paint, the walls will start seeping this brown liquid, and they think, oh my gosh, it's a ghost, it's a spirit. And I looked into it, and it turns out that when you freshly paint a wall like this wall, over time, some of the resins in the paint will seep out with the changes of the weather and the humidity and create that brown liquid that comes off the paint. And it's a very normal and expected part of remodeling because it's a physical result of the actual chemicals in the paint. So again, mundane before magical. Don't get upset about something if it has a mundane cause. And if you do feel like something spiritual is happening, it's super important to sit back and say, okay, what are all of the possible mundane reasons why this could happen? Is there any mundane reason at all why this could happen? And look at that first before you think that it's a spiritual issue. Now, there are some spiritual issues that come up, but they're often very few and far between, and it doesn't happen frequently. It can just be that when we don't know something, we don't know the cause of something, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anticipation or anxiety because we don't know that. And so we tend to look to the unknown for what actually has a mundane source. This goes back a little bit to the fear. The fear aspect I talked about earlier is if you are thinking everything is a spiritual problem, that could be a fear mentality. That could be because you fear the other side or you fear your spiritual practices. And again, that is one of those red flags that you want to keep that in check. Who is in control of your life? Is it you and your decisions, or is it your spiritual beliefs that are controlling you? Another thing to consider when we are putting our mundane and spiritual lives into balance is that mental health is very important. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it. It's a little bit taboo, but it's super, super important, especially with spiritual practices, that your mental health is in check. We had a previous podcast episode, I believe it was the last podcast episode we did before this one, all about mental health and its connection with spirituality. So if you want to learn more about that, please check out that previous podcast on mental health because it has a lot of great information from a mental health professional directly. So mental health is very important, but it is very separate from spirituality. And when we are considering the mundane before the magical, you do want to consider, is this a mental health issue? Do I need to talk to a mental health professional about this? And this is particularly the case if it's a pattern and if it's significantly impacting your life in a negative way. Sometimes you do need some professional assistance, and that is not something we can provide as psychic advisors on Mysticsense. So you do want to realize that mental health is very separate. It's a completely different field from spirituality. The two do not overlap at all. And it's important to make sure that what you're experiencing might not be a mental health, or it might possibly be a mental health concern that you need to seek out medical assistance with. And it is super vital to embrace the idea and the truth that spirituality is not a fix-all for life's problems. If you've read through our Mysticsense house rules, you'll know that our psychics cannot provide magical services or spells or witchcraft, and part of that is liability, but part of that is also because spirituality is simply not a fix-all for life's problems. If you are struggling in life, doing spiritual work and doing spells and manifesting things, it may provide you a sense of support, and it may help the situation a little bit, but it is not going to fix the problems. You need to fix the problems with a combination technique of getting to the root of the issue, acknowledging it, getting the support you need, and doing the mundane work to solve the issue, as well as the spiritual work as well. Because if we think about it, spirit is on one side. We have the matter, we have the physical world, but we also have, mundane is on one side. It's the physical world, it's matter, it's, what we see, what we do, what we hear, what we feel. We also have the spiritual side. There is that divider, that veil between the two. Sometimes the veil's super thin, like this time of year. Sometimes it's thicker and we're not as aware of the spiritual side. But the spiritual side's over here. It's separated from the mundane. It is very important, and this includes belief systems, energy work, divination, spell work, manifestation, all of that. It is very important to acknowledge that the world is made up of these two halves. It's made up of everything. And it's important to have a balance between the two. You can't have all spirit, no matter. And you can have all matter, no spirit, but it can add a lot of depth to your life and your experience to have a balance of both, of the spiritual side and the physical side together. They work in unity. They are yin and yang, and they are here to support each other and to benefit each other. And if your spirituality is harming your mundane life, that is a problem. And it's something that needs addressing, because spirituality cannot fix everything. It can provide support, it can provide comfort, but it's not going to fix all of life's problems. That's super important to acknowledge, to understand. Sometimes you need to do something different. You need to make an action. Sometimes you need professional help. And spirituality is not a standalone solution. So keep those things in mind when you are looking at your spiritual path. Ask yourself, is this supporting me or is it harming me? And if it is harming you, you might want to step back, not do spiritual things as much, reevaluate your relationship with spirituality, and your relationship to your beliefs and the reasons why you believe those things. And if you need to, you might want to seek out professional help as well to help you with your relationship between your spiritual path and beliefs and your mundane physical life. Your spiritual path should always be a benefit to your life and provide emotional comfort, and it should never be the source of negative things such as stress or fear. Stress and fear around spiritual things is unfortunately common, and my opinion and my belief on this is that a lot of the cause has to do with this imbalance of spirituality and mundane life. It can be that people feel that the spiritual world is more powerful than the mundane world, instead of viewing them as equal opposite sides of the same thing. And again, if you are living in fear, if it's causing you stress, that you're having spiritual problems, do seek out professional advice. It may be mental health related. It may be that you need to not do as much spirituality. You need to step back. It may be that you need to ground yourself more, take actions to take better care of yourself or your situation. And there can be many, many causes for that, but it is important to realize that, again, spirituality cannot fix everything. It might not be that you need a ritual or something to help you with this problem. It might be that you have to, go do something different in your life or get help from a professional. And there are many different kinds of professionals out there for different situations. Again, that is not one size fits all either. So I do hope this has helped you with this podcast episode, because there's a lot to go into with the differences between spirituality and mundane life. And do keep in mind that reading a book on spiritual things is not the same as taking a break from it. Education is great. It's great to learn about things before you do them. And starting with the mundane before you go into the magical is always a great idea. And what I want to say as well is, if you're starting a spiritual practice and you're brand new to it, make sure you do study and learn about it before you start practicing. It's just like any other skill set, any other practice. You wouldn't try to repair your car without reading the manual. So before you start doing a new spiritual practice, it is very helpful to read a book or two, or a few books, or at least to research online, to get an idea of how to do it and what other people's experiences are with it. And that can in itself provide a sense of comfort and understanding, that you truly understand and you're comfortable with what you're doing. Because another thing I see people have sometimes that causes problems for them with their spiritual practice is that they jump into it without understanding what they're doing, or they just try it out because it sounds cool, and then it works or something happens and they get scared because they don't understand why it worked. They don't understand how the process is meant to happen. And really, there's no reason to fear these things if you understand what you're doing and why, and how it's impacting your life. So being educated and knowing these things, reading the book about it before you try it, can really bring some peace of mind as well. And if it's not for you, just stop doing it and don't do it anymore. It really is that simple. But do keep in mind that you want to avoid any kind of fear reaction when it comes to your personal spiritual practice. And if it is a belief system that's causing you fear, you want to ask yourself, why am I believing that? Even if it's a religion, ask yourself, do I truly believe this, and why am I believing this? And if the answer is positive and it's supporting you, that is wonderful. But some people, unfortunately, get stuck in cycles that cause them to have problems with their spirituality, but with other people as well, because they don't know the answer to the big why. They don't know why they're doing it. They don't know why they believe it. And unfortunately, a way to address this is not only to ask those questions, but again, that education piece of understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it's impacting you personally. So it is vital to have a healthy balance between spiritual things and mundane life. Yes, you can be strictly mundane, but on this platform, of course, many of us are spiritual practitioners. So when you are dealing with spirituality, it is very vital to have a balance between the two. Spirituality should be a support and an aid to your life, and it should not be a control of your life. If you feel like there is some big spiritual thing controlling all of the things you do, that is really disempowering. And you want your spiritual path to empower you, to support you, to aid you, and to guide you forward with your life, and to be a benefit, a source of comfort and joy, and purpose. And it can only do that when it's balanced with the mundane actions and the mundane life. So do keep that in mind. Some things, some situations, some problems cannot be dealt with spiritually. You can always try to do spiritual afterwards. For example, if you are having problems, if you're having pain or something, definitely go see your doctor first, get that treated, and then you can do the energy healing. And then you can do the spiritual practices after you take care of the mundane piece. And they can work in tandem, they can work side by side, but you cannot replace mundane solutions with strictly spiritual ones, because again, it's two sides of the same coin. You do need both of them in order to have a really good balance and a very mutually beneficial relationship. So I do hope that this has helped add some guidance and to clarify some things about your spiritual path and how to balance it with your mundane life, so that you're not feeling controlled by your beliefs, and that your spirituality is not negatively impacting your life, but that they're both positively benefiting you in the best possible way. So thank you so much for watching this podcast today. I really appreciate it. You can always get a reading with me or get personalized spiritual guidance from me directly on mysticsense.com. Just search for Phoenix K and look for my profile picture. Thanks for watching.